Thank the CDIP for this award. It's unexpected and a pleasure to receive it. Unfortunately, I can't be there at your meeting to participate in a question and answering conversation hour. In beginning, I make note of the fact that 50 years ago, in 1964, in August, I delivered the presidential address for Division 22, which was then a newborn division. I think it was the second year of its operation. At that time, I bemoaned the fact that we had started to develop a frame of reference for psychology of disability, sponsored by the work of Tamara Dimbo and Beatrice Wright. However, I bemoaned the fact that there was no psychology of rehabilitation. As a clinician working in a rehabilitation setting, I was struck with the fact that we had increasingly people with brain damage who we didn't know what to do with. We literally did not know what our jobs were. The notion of intervention for a cognitive deficit was a sort of backwater issue. I believe in the 19th century there was a need in Middle Europa. There was a man named Dr. Finagle who introduced mnemonic devices to audiences. It was widely accepted and turned out to be a fraud. Since that time, the word finagle has evolved in our vocabulary, and the notion of touching, trying to teach attention and memory, has been ignored by mainline psychology. When Yehuda was in Israel, he discovered that the soldiers were very well treated, but they could not be managed. There were behavioral disturbances. The families couldn't live with them. Psychiatrically, medications didn't help. And so he put together a program which consisted of a couple main elements. First, combining cognitive remediation for a variety of deficits, psychological counseling. All this was done in individual and group basis in an intensive hothouse atmosphere, so that the patients, who then became known as trainees, were immersed for a 20-hour-a-week program. The program turned out to be quite successful and was sponsored by the Israeli Defense Department. When the war was over, and Yehuda came back to the United States, we figured we had no such program in the States and developed it. And we took 100 patients who had failed vocal rehab systems, submitted them to a variety of interventions, including combinations of cognitive and counseling interventions, and found that they were extremely helpful. And more than half of them eventually went back to some sort of productive employment. This became the basis not only of further research work, but the basis of an ongoing clinical program which still exists today, I guess some 32 plus years after we brought it back to the States. Now, this has been a journey of over 50 years. There are some things that I learned that I think I sort of like to mention. One is that in cognitive rehabilitation, a key element is to make a student out of a patient. And the first step you need is engagement. Along with that is another insight that I gathered. A critical problem is the patient's or trainee's unawareness of the problem. And teaching someone to be aware of a difficulty, you will find, is extremely difficult. Indeed, if the issue is not acceptable. It's also compounded by the fact that unawareness may be neurologically or psychologically based. And a lot of the work, a lot of the efforts which do not appear in manuals have to do with the relationships established to deal with the issues of unawareness and to make them palatable. Among other things I learned is cognitive deficits seldom exist in isolation. They are always intertwined with other issues. And indeed, I've learned in the course of treatment, you learn more about the problem that you would from a diagnostic issue, because in trying to treat, you've got to break down the steps that are causing the failures. Among the current issues is now that we have come a long way in the field, we are in a position to develop tools to negotiate with insurance companies, to establish credibility for our endeavors. There is still need for continuing random controlled trials. There is much need for replication in the studies that have been done, and the expansion or the examination of cognitive mediation and cognitive rehabilitation to other areas of disability. Okay, and so I'd like to thank you for inviting me to give this talk.